Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is very clear that the Liberals have lost control of crime. Let's look at their track record since 2015. Violent crime is up 55%, firearms crime is up 130%, extortion skyrocketed and it's up 330%. Sexual assaults are up 76% and homicides are up 29%. Now, they've introduced Bill C-14, which has taken some of our conservative suggestions, but I feel the bill still falls short in some areas. It does not remove the principle of restraint, which prioritizes criminals over victims. It does not restore mandatory minimum sentences repealed by Bill C-5. Conditional sentence order limits don't go far enough. For example, robbery, gun, and trafficking offenses can still access house arrest. Let's start with the principle of restraint. When the Liberals introduced Bill C-75, it weakened our court's ability to keep violent and repeat offenders behind bars because it directed them to release the accused persons at the earliest reasonable opportunity and under the least onerous conditions. Bill C-14 stops short of repealing this. Although it confirms restraint does not require release, it still leaves the door open to allow violent criminals to get bail. C-75, which introduced the principle of restraint, was the Liberals' attempt at bail reform. The fact that we're standing here talking about it means it failed. And now C-14 is only going halfway to remove it. This bill still directs our courts to release criminals on the least onerous conditions necessary when it does order bail. What Canadians need is safe streets they can walk down and safe homes they can sleep in. And the only way we can restore that is by completely removing this weak Liberal bail policy. C-75 was the Liberals' attempt at bail reform, and now we can both agree it completely failed. We should be scrapping the principle of restraint entirely and replacing it with a clause that prioritizes public safety, or just get rid of it completely. C-14 stops halfway to solving the issue of mandatory minimums. It includes consecutive sentences and aggravating factors, but it leaves those up to judicial discretion. And most importantly, it does not resonate mandatory minimums. Criminals charged with firearms, sexual, and repeat violent offenses should be afraid of committing crimes because they received a mandatory minimum sentence. It creates accountability and it puts fear into criminals. Instead, criminals aren't deteriorated by a weak Liberal policy. Just to name a few, C-5 repealed the following mandatory minimums: discharging a firearm with intent, mandatory minimum of 4 years; discharging a firearm, recklessness, 4 years; robbery with a firearm, 4 years; extortion with a firearm, 4 years. Why should those have been repealed? Makes absolutely no sense. Here are some examples of how weak Liberal bail policies impact our communities. In this House, we've heard about Bailey McCourt, a young mother of 2 daughters who was killed by her ex-husband just hours after he was released on bail. Just recently, another young mother of 4, Savannah Kula, was killed by her former partner in Brampton while he was out on bail. Earlier this year, Hamilton Police had to release a statement after a man convicted of several sexual assaults was released on bail. In 2022, this man dragged a woman into the woods, gagged and tied her hands behind her back, and proceeded to assault her. In 2023, this man entered the home of a 74-year-old woman and assaulted her for over an hour. In February this year, he was released on bail pending his trial. Hamilton Police released a statement with his picture to warn people because they believed he remained a threat to the community, obviously. C-14 gives us half measures instead of complete solutions. I've heard from Canadians over the course of the election that they want to be safe at home and out on the streets, but after 10 years, of this Liberal government. They don't feel safe in their own neighborhoods. And rightfully so, when we have criminals like I just described being released back on our streets within hours. For 10 years, the Conservatives have been advocating and presenting solutions to the weak bail system. And at every turn, the Liberals have voted against us. Our plan to restore safe streets is common sense. We want to repeal and replace the principle of restraint with a public safety primary clause. This would put the public and the community safety as the government principle, putting Canadians first, not criminals. We want to restore mandatory minimum sentences for firearms crimes, sexual assaults, kidnapping, human trafficking, and other serious violent crime. Sounds very reasonable to me. We want to restore CSO ineligibility to exclude robbery, firearms, trafficking, and chronic violent offenders. Conditional sentence orders will allow an offender to serve their sentence in the community under strict conditions, like house arrest or curfew. There is no reason for someone who commits human trafficking, they should be able to serve their time in the comfort of their own home and our neighborhoods. It absolutely makes zero sense. Conservatives are ready to propose extending reverse onus on major crimes and making any attack on first responders a major offense in one of my colleagues' Jail Not Bail Act, which the Liberals voted against. The Liberals are starting to see what their destructive policies have done to our communities, which is why they've started taking Conservative suggestions on bail reform. But their proposed solution, Bill C-14, doesn't patch up all the holes they've made. The Conservatives have listened to Canadians. We've already come forward with a plan that would completely patch up the holes that the Liberals have made in our bail system. Our Jail Not Bail Act covers everything I've just talked about. It puts victims first and focuses on public safety instead of how short we can make a criminal sentence. It creates major offenses category that triggers detention first posture for the following charges: firearms offenses, sexual offenses, kidnapping, human trafficking, home invasion, break and enter into dwellings, robbery, extortion, arson, and assault. That sounds very good to me. Makes it mandatory for judges to consider full criminal history of accused, introduces the 10-year look-back rule, meaning if someone has been convicted of a major offense in the last 10 years, it is charged with another major offense while on bail, they will be barred from receiving bail again. These all sound like common sense policies, but under the Liberal government, common sense has disappeared and was replaced with weak policies that allow bail for violent criminals. You cannot prioritize the victim and the offender at the same time. For too long, this government has been prioritizing the criminal, and our public safety has declined as a result. Our cities have been taken over by violent repeat criminals released time and time again. The Liberals are demanding that their prior policies have failed Canadians when it comes to safety, because they acknowledge that 41% a rise in violent crime severity index since 2014 and increases in homicide, sexual assault, and extortion offenses. Bill C-14 attempts to fix the consequences of their past Bill C-75 and C-5, which weaken the bail system, except they're keeping the same language framework, the same language that puts priority on releasing the criminal. Conservatives will make sure this bill actually scraps the weak Liberal policies in favor of public and community safety. Madam Speaker, I apologize. Our country hit an absolute rock bottom this weekend when the Supreme Court ruled there will be no mandatory minimums on criminals who access or possess child sexual abuse content, or in other words, content that has children being raped. Let me repeat. Yes, you heard me clearly. The new Supreme Court ruling after 10 years of this Liberal government have removed mandatory minimum sentences for criminals who access or possess child sexual abuse content. This kind of culture the Liberals have created in Canada for the past decade, that even mandatory minimum jail sentences for accessing or possessing Child sexual abuse content is viewed unconstitutional.
But time is up, so it's time for questions. The Honourable Member for Scarborough-Woburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask the member opposite if he will be supporting this bill that really does reform the Justice Act to put in place harsher sentences when it comes to bail reform. And I want to know if the Conservatives will help pass this legislation.
Honourable Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
So what I would like to do is ask and also comment that this last week has been very, very difficult for me as a father. We've heard something that, yes, is a Supreme Court ruling, but after 10 years of this weak Liberal policy, this is what we've come to. This is a low point in the Canadian judicial system. So will the Liberals be using the notwithstanding clause, or even simply will the Prime Minister even comment on what happened on Friday? That's what me and every Canadian would like to know, especially the parents out there.
Des commentaires, l'honorable député de Drummond.
The honourable member for Drummond. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Liberals. The member was putting their earpiece on. The honourable member for Drummond. Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know the Liberals are blamed for a lot of things. Very often they don't get things right, and they might even be a bit incompetent in some areas. But to claim that a Supreme Court decision is due to the Liberal government's policies, well, I think we should point out that the Supreme Court assesses the constitutionality of legislation. So if we're going to be serious about such a serious debate, we shouldn't make things up that don't make any sense for partisan purposes. My question for my colleague is, yes, C-14 goes a lot less far than the Conservatives would have liked. The Conservatives would like to see more tough on crime kind of legislation, especially when it comes to bail. But C-14 does do something. It does improve certain things, and even the Bloc thinks that there are some good things about it. Shouldn't we start with that, send the bill to committee, and improve it as much as we can, and then see what happens?
The Honourable Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
I would like to thank my colleague for the question. Yes, it proposes some things, but not enough. We're here debating this because Liberal bail reform in the form of C-75, which they introduced many years ago, has completely failed. And in my opinion, this doesn't even go halfway. So again, we're standing here because Liberal bail reform has completely failed. Bill C-75 should be repealed completely.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for the Honourable Member for Oxford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my great colleague for his great intervention today. He's attended many events across the community. He's been to town halls, and I see him interacting with those in Hamilton and across the GTA. I just want to get a sense from him. What is he hearing from parents? What is he hearing from our seniors when it comes to crime? What is happening on the ground? If you don't mind sharing some of those stories with us today in the chamber, that'd be appreciated. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. And yes, I've attended a lot of town halls and will be having my own shortly. And people have just had enough, Madam Speaker. We've heard some very, very sad stories. We've heard stories that could have been prevented. We've heard lives lost. We're hearing Canadians are completely fed up. We're having record numbers of people come out to these events, and I'd like to point out that they're not partisan events. These are people who are coming looking for answers, and they're asking us, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to someone I know? Why did this happen to my child? Why did this happen? And we keep pointing back to Bill C-75. We keep pointing back to the failed Liberal justice system. After 10 years, I find it hard to believe that members on the other side are absolutely not listening to Canadians when they are speaking loud and clear to everybody in this House.